happy to be here. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you, all of you, the public, who actually, for your stamina. You know, this is your third day, and this is quite a tiring thing, such a conference. I beg your pardon?
No.
Not at all. Wonderful. Each time I sort of start talking like this, I feel I have a feeling I have to apologize for not bringing you the PowerPoint. So, literally, what you see is what you get, unfortunately. And I'm going to try to be sort of more, to talk more interestingly, to, well, keep your attention. Well, in order to start, I would have to say that this is against even my intention, but apparently this red thread, this innuendo of this conference, starting on Wednesday, this stress being laid on the periphery, province, margin, edge, whatever we call it, with relationship to the center, actually permeates out also from my presentation today. This was not my intention, but apparently there is something to it. Although I have a particular, opinion on that precisely because it's not the artistic, I would say, side of it that splits or is being split between northeast, west, south, or vertically, horizontally, but it's more a, I would say, political, social perspective, because it's really difficult to limit art per se, right? Because we know that the spirit flows wherever it wants, or wherever it goes. But nevertheless, let me concentrate on my topic. I'm going to return to the early avant-garde that Tomáš started with. That means the 20s, or even the first decades of the 20th century. And I'm going to be talking about drama, the texts, not the theater itself. These plays that I'm going to be mentioning today were staged, especially in the theater of Maribor, the city municipality theater of Ptuj even, but they all remained sort of at the outskirts of the main street. And I hope you will see actually at the end why. Because I'm going to be concentrating on the topic of the relationship between two sexes. Very fraught topic, which came out quite strongly and to, in my opinion, even to an extreme in Slovenian drama. Much more so than its sort of sources or the originals, if we again agree with this split in Western Europe. Let me just first frame or set the framework for my talk. Without a doubt, we can say that the history of gender relations is as long as the history of humanity itself, and also that it was somehow from the beginning of the creation, these relations actually were presented also in art. In addition to that, it's probably not wrong to say that these relations were simply presented from the male view, and the female, gender female sex, of course, almost as a rule, assumed a role of an object. There were cases where this object suddenly took on some kind of an autonomous role, and interestingly enough, as soon as this happened, it actually threatened the male subject in his function as the master of the world, as it had been already written in the Bible, as we all know, right? Because we were the male is supposed to be the owner of the world, right? So, independent thinking and behavior of women was almost always linked to the simultaneous threat of men. One of the fundamental forms of female emancipation in art has been subsumed and relatively late, that means around the turn of the century, 1900s, under the term of femme fatale, or fatal woman, which probably might be somehow subsumed or defined as an independent creature of, female sex, who apparently does not give in, does not cave in to all the demands of the male side, male partner, whoever. In the 20s, when the femme fatale was actually created as such, it appeared, or what came obvious, or became obvious, was that a fatal woman appeared as the heir of the scientific, that means biological, psychological, and so process of the 19th century, and became an ambiguous figure. On the one hand, I mean, what they realized, the artists, of course, mostly male, realized that she fell into her own trap. On the one hand, she controlled men. Now it turned out she was controlled by her own drives, desires, goals. An infamous, of course, addition to this discussion, if I may say so, was this book from 1903 by Otto Weininger, Sex and Gender. Not Sex and Gender, but Sex and Character, sorry. The Slovenians got a translation of that from 1936, relatively late, but still, and it's a terrible read. To draw the line, it's, of course, and I'm making some pretty necessary generalizations to wrap this up. If there is one single quality of this femme fatale that one should underline, that would be her existential independence, social brazenness, if you want, and of course, on the other hand, the fear from the male counterparts who somehow saw their control slip away from them. And they saw this control in two ways. Of course, one, by just not being able to control, and on the other hand, by being somehow overpowered by the female sex. Just in order, I mean, it's not difficult to look for the cases in, world art history. From Sphinx, I mean, Sphinx in Slovenian is female, right? So, but we don't know what Sphinx actually was. But from Sphinx to Sirens, to Circe, to Medea in ancient mythology, to then of course from Bible we've got cases like Lilith, Eve, Salome, Delilah, Judith, and so on and so on. So many cases. There have been cases in literature where this femme fatale was connected to the serpent, even Satan. And of course, the point behind was the fear of her unsuspected sensuality, and of course, the consequent physical and or mental destruction of the male. So in a way, femme fatale was the embodiment of this eternal pair, Eros and Thanatos, for the male gaze, for the male view. Now if we skip the entire 2,000 years of human art and history, we come to the 19th century where the modern version of this appeared. There were two playwrights who really started writing about the gender relations. One was Ibsen, and the other one was Strindberg. And I'm not going to elaborate on that, because you probably would, of course, know very well what this was all about. Let me just name the plays like A Doll's House, Wild Duck, Hedda Gabler from Ibsen, Rosemarysholm, for example, or Miss Julie and the Father, or Ghost Sonata from Strindberg. The two fundamental cases for, or of femme fatale in European, let's say, fin de siècle, or turn of the century drama, were coming from the Viennese circles. And one was Frank Wedekind and his drama The Pandora's Box, written in 1894. And the other one was, of course, Arthur Schnitzler with the Reigen, or in English La Ronde, or in Slovenian Rajanje, 1897. The thing is that even though I depicted this terrible figure of femme fatale in these very profoundly destructive towards the male, right, terms, the funny thing is that both Lulu from Pandora's Box and the Reigen actually present, one would say, a very, or a relatively naturalistic relationship between the two sexes. Lulu is simply a girl from the bottom of the society who is being found by a man who becomes her lover later on, then she's being, of course, elevated into higher strata of society, then she slowly continues her fall in through, of course, she has to run away from the situations, right, to Paris and then London, where she's being butchered by Jack, probably Jack the Ripper. In the Reigen, we have 10 different situations of, encounters, probably also the intercourse between two genders, and it only shows different kinds of, let's say, fallen women, again, and I'm underscoring this as such, in order to show, in what relationships, in what trouble men could get themselves into. But these are relatively, for the lack of a better word, innocent cases of this terrible power that women, according to the theory, exert over men. If we now look at the Slovenian drama, Slovenian theater, well, theater less so, but drama mostly, we would be very surprised that we get both examples of the naturalist train of thought, or artistic line, and the expressionist, I would say. And the naturalist, one would be surprised, also touched upon such authors as Anton Aškerc, who had been a priest before writing this, in his, for example, play Izmailo, where there is a lady who enjoys her life, has a lover, doesn't want to move with her husband Izmailov, who's a Russian officer somewhere else. He has to, of course, somehow buy her love, so he steals something, and then he's caught. So in order to somehow protect his good name, he commits suicide. So in a way, of course, it was the woman who really destroyed this poor creature. A little bit even more extreme was Engelbert Gangl. I don't even think that anybody from Slovenian audience here has heard of this person. And this Gangl wrote two plays. Aškerc started in 1900. This was the date of his play. And Gangl followed very soon, 1901 and 1902. And interestingly enough, it was a Czech theoretician, or historian of theater, Slovenian theater, Frank Volman, who wrote about this gentleman, this author, I quote, that Gandel represents a terrible copy of naturalism in Slovenian drama. And it's really not worth having a look at these plays, because they do show, in a way, bad taste of Gandel. And an author that I'm going to discuss just now was actually writing also a criticism of Gandel, saying that this was the dramatic substance is as repulsive as it is bad. I mean, the quality of, it's not the problem, the question, but the quality of the plays is really not worth mentioning. And there is, for example, even Edwin Christan, who wrote a play Volia, or A Will, in 1902, where there is a femme fatale who manages to subjugate the entire family, but they don't actually give in or cave in to her intrigues, so she ultimately somehow is being defeated, and she, as a sphinx, throws herself from the cliff into the sea. So this moralistic conclusion does really make this play really unworthy of talking or discussing. But there are two authors who are quite much more extreme, and this is something that really drew my attention. One was Adolf Robida, probably not a very famous one, and the other one is one a little bit more, and his name was Angelo Cerkvenik. Angelo Cerkvenik wrote in the 20s. His plays came out in 25 to 28. And Cerkvenik is best known for his trilogy, U vrtincu, greh and očiščenje, which translates in English, in a whirl or a whirlwind, a sin, and cleansing, probably. I prefer this to purification. Cleansing is better. The thing, let me just briefly describe the talks and then, of course, unfortunately, make the conclusion. Cerkvenik describes a woman who's absolutely ruled by her low physical instincts, where she leaves her husband and surrenders to her lover. When he gets tired of her, he tries to shake her off, only with the greatest difficulty. Then when he finally dumps her, the wife wanders into a brothel. She reacts to his pleas to get back to him because he remains, somehow apollinically haughty in a way. He doesn't believe her falling into the sin, right? And she suggests they would make a complete or commit a double suicide. And in the end, of course, when he drinks the poison, she lets the cup fall on the floor. And then she is presented to her doppelganger in a mirror, and this doppelganger lashes out at her, saying, and these words are really tough, I warn you, "You knew from the very beginning that you would never kill yourself. You had a cup at your mouth, you already tilted it, but then you yourself won and threw it on the ground. You want more mud, more manure, you want to infect thousands more. Leprosy, go leper, go to the cesspool, among the spit and under the table scum," and so on and so on. This is really tough. But wait, it only gets better. The second, in a sin, there is also a triangle with a lover, and in the end, a woman somehow realizing that in the end she had been sinning, she throws herself out of the window. She survives. And the final scene is the three of them sitting together celebrating the anniversary of the fall or the jump, seeing that, you know, nothing can move on. And cleansing is a little bit, again, a different thing, where in the end it's woman who sees her wrong path. She has been also forced to go, or she has been actually taken from the brothel into the decent society by her husband, married of course and everything, and he actually plays an experiment with her. In a way like a Pygmalion, but much worse, right? And she cannot stand this pressure and commits suicide. A completely another story, and this is here that I'm, you know, with these, with this, examples, I'm gonna finish my presentation. A completely different story is Cerkvenik's discussion of a male figure. How he's so pristine, so apollinically believing in the good of humanity, human beings, and that these women that actually he interacts with, or they interact with, are simply just something that actually serves their cleansing or purification. It's mind-boggling to see that something like that had, or could have been written. I have to say that I was really thinking hard, where did this come from? Or why in Slovenia we could get such misogynistic texts in a way. I have to admit that I do not have an answer. There may be something of a hint, though. Namely, Cerkvenik has, in the last of his trilogy dramas, right, in Cleansing, written a dedication. And it says, it reads, "To the husband from the tragedy in the whirlwind, to the husband from the tragedy, the sin, to the husband from the tragedy, the cleansing, to the man, or husband, možu in Slovenian, and artist, Valo Bratina. I dedicate this my first book." If you look up Valo Bratina, this was a theater director. He sort of staged the whirlwind and the sin of Angelo Cerkvenik. He translated Roderick Benedict's play, The Enemy of Women, in 1914. He staged even that. But on the other hand, if we then this hint that I mentioned could be actually going into some individual, particular, personal realm. But I guess that to this question, we are probably not going to get the answers.